Okay. See where we're holding. I think we're on Memamid Beis by V'Amarava. We just finished the Ksus Laila, right? V'Amarava, it's
talking about night garments,
6, 7, 8, 7 lines. 7 lines down. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And the schus of our learning, we should have the base of Migdash immediately.
Amen.
So it says like this. V'amar Rava Hamil Sa'amri. Rava says that the following thing I said, V'tmar Rava Shmei Rab Zera Kabasi. And in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they said it in the name of Rab Zera, exactly like what I said. And it goes as follows. He shall beged a knafer shalar. Let's say the garment itself is made out of a woven material. However, the corner is made out of leather. And leather is not woven. Leather is just the hide. And the leather is pater from tzitzis. But the thing is like this. So what do you look at? Do you look at the main garment, which is chayiv and tzitzis? Or do you look at the corner, which is where you put the tzitzis on, and over there it's pater from tzitzis? So Rava says that chayev. It's chayev b'tzitzis. But let's say the opposite. He shalar knafer shel beged. Let's say you have a leather garment, but the corner is made out of something woven, right? In a beged, there's chayiv and tzitzis. But nevertheless, we say that this tzitzis is going to be pater. The Gemara explains, my taima, what's the reason? Iker beged be'inan. The main beged has to be chayiv and tzitzis for the main beged. The main garment has to be a beged. Yeah. And the Gemara tells us that Rav Achai, Ozel, Basar, Kanaf. Rav Achai doesn't say so. Rav Achai says that we follow the corner, not the beged. Four-cornered garment. The word garment means woven. And if it's not woven, yeah, I see in my comments in this Gemara, they have an interesting question. Let's say someone takes leather and makes it into strands and weaves a leather garment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have the question? That's a good question.
That's a great question.
So they quote from Reb Moshe Feinstein in the Igros Moshe. He says that it's going to be pater. Because the typical use of leather is not woven, it automatically makes leather pater. Yeah, that was interesting. Okay. So, but we do have over here a machlekes between Rava and Rabbi Chai. I wonder if Rabbi Chai is the goyim. Sometimes we had, remember in Ksubas, we had Rabbi Chai, and Taisvus over there said that it wasn't an Amira, it was one of the goyim. It was after the time of the Gemara. Anyway, okay. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Schaira, Amar Rav Huna. This is Rava saying the name of Rav Schaira, the name of Rav Huna. Hitil lebala shalish v'shlima la'arba. Let's say you had a garment that only had 3 corners. And then you went ahead and said, 3 corners, okay, let me start putting the tzitzis on. When you finished, after you put on the 3 tzitzis, then you finished the garment and you made the garment 4 corners. So you put the v'shlim al-arba, and then you finish the garment, and then you put the tzitzis on the last one. It says psula. That's invalid. The reason is mishum ta'aseh. It says in the pasuk gedilim ta'aseh l'cha, and ta'aseh v'lay min ha'asi. You have to make it, and not from what's already made. So which means that at the time that it became chayiv and tzitzis, when it has the 4 corners, 3 of them were already made. You have to make it when it's chayiv. After it's chayiv, then you make it. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Chassidim Rishayim, they're the Chassidim kivan she'argu ba shalish matilim la tchelas. The early Chassidim, once they would when you weave a garment, you weave it. You use a loom, so it continues. You make more and more, and it continues on. So you start off with the the two corners on one end, and you're weaving. And so the Chassidim Rishonim, according to the first understanding of this Gemara, is once they wove 3 fingers worth of this new garment, they put the tzitzis on right away. The Chassidim, they wanted to do everything quickly, right away. So they put the tzitzis on, and then afterwards, when it made it to the end, they would put the tzitzis on the other side of the garment. Problem is that Tasav Alei Menasi, you just told me that if it's not chayiv and tzitzis, then and you put it on before it's chayiv, and then afterwards you make it chayiv, and then you already have 2 on, so that's not valid. So the Gemara says, that's a question. The Gemara answers, Eima kivan shepatzu bashalish. I don't know what the word patzu is, but they have another version of that word, patzu. Whatever the case is, the way the commentaries explain it, it's once you have only 3 fingers worth left, then they would already put on the tzitzis on the first one, which means that it was already chayiv in tzitzis. The only thing is they're adding a little extension to the end, but the chiyuv was already there. So those 2 corners were the original corners that are going to get tzitzis, and when the beged is already chayiv in tzitzis. Now, when we just add on a little more at the end, that's not considered anything, and when you can put the tzitzis on the other ones afterwards. No, I saw it. I forget.
Is the amount of cloth necessary to make a garment?
Yeah, we need the right size. Once it's the right size, so it has to be within the last 3 fingers. Otherwise, it would be considered like you added a new garment, and that's already not acceptable to have the tzitzis on beforehand. So if it's within the last 3 fingers, yeah, then you could already put the tzitzis on the first 2 corners. Umar asks, do we actually say that there's a problem of having it made beforehand and then making it kosher later? Rab Zera says this is going to be a big discussion. That hitel mutelas, let's say you had a garment that already had its tzitzis on it. You went ahead and you added another set of tzitzis onto this garment. Yeah, you hear what's going on? It's already tzitzis hanging, and you put more tzitzis still. The extra from. So what's the problem? It says hitel mutelas. There it says kshera. What are you going to do? You're going to put it on. I guess what the person's trying to do is he's trying to change his tzitzis, and so he puts the tzitzis look old or whatever, the dirty. So he wants new tzitzis, but he doesn't want to leave it without tzitzis at all. So while the old tzitzis are still hanging, he puts the new strings on, and then he cuts off the old strings. But when he's putting on the new strings, it's pater. So it only becomes chayev in tzitzis when you cut off the old ones. When you cut off the old ones, you're supposed to be putting on the new tzitzis. It's already on. So by the time the new tzitzis are being used, it was already made. So that's a tasav alei menasi. You have to make it. It's not supposed to be already made. And we're seeing that who's saying this? Reb Zera says that it's not a problem, which means probably that there's no problem with tasav alei menasi. Rava responds to this, says that's not a question, because Hashta Baltaisif Koi, someone that puts on an extra tzitzis is actually violating the Torah rule of not to add to the Torah.
Whoa.
So then when Maisa Lehavi, so when you put it on, when you add the next tzitzis on, since the Torah prohibits it, so it's not considered that the tzitzis are really there. It's like nothing. And then when you cut off the old ones, that's considered a maisa. So it's not considered that you're making the tzitzis are already been made. It's considered like you're making it when you cut off the new ones. So yeah, there's some Masech Sukkah also. We had something similar in Masech the Sukkah where Maseches mentions this.
In Sukkah, I think what we learned was the problem was if the schach was on first, there was no good. Therefore, you had to put on the schach after the walls, and that way you're doing the schach. I think
Yeah,
that was. I think.
correct. I'm referring to another detail in that.
Oh, all right.
That was you're correct about that. That the walls have to be up, and then you put on the schach. Otherwise, if you do the schach first, and then you put up the walls, then that would be tasavle menase. That the sukkah is being kosherized after it was already made. And that's not acceptable. But there's another detail there. Let's say you have schach that's growing from the ground, and it's like a vine. It's attached to the ground. It's draped over your sukkah. So that when you cut it, so there's a machlekes Rav and Shmuel over there. If you have to lift up the schach and put it back down, or if it's good enough just to cut it. Right. So I think like comparing this to that is that there is an opinion there that holds that cutting it would be satisfactory. You cut it, the Gemara says kitzitzasan zui asiyasan. When you cut it, that's like as if you're putting it on. The other opinion says no. It used to be puzzle. Now you cut it, you're kosherizing it, and you didn't do any new action. So it's tasal le'manasi. The other opinion says no. Your action is you cut it. That is the making of it. So similar to that would be here. You're cutting it off. That's the making of it. The thing is over here, there's a difference because over here it was exempt. When you cut off the old ones, over there it wasn't exempt. You cut off the old ones, you're making the chiyuv, and that's the action. You're making it into tzitzis. Over there, it wasn't exempt. It was puzzle. Maybe the same thing. Maybe it's the same thing.
The other case, when they were combined, it wasn't with intention. They were bringing up intention.
I don't know if the intention matters by sukkah. You don't need intention by sukkah, according to this one. No, because by tzitzis you need intention. By sukkah you don't need intention, right? It's according to Beis Hillel. Machlekes over there in sukkah if you need intention.
But how can you do Baal Tosif? Like, how can you add that fifth string? That isn't that a problem? Like, even though it's temporary.
It is a problem. It's a problem because of that. So we're not considering it to be valid.
But like the chatchila, you can go and add it even if it's
temporary. It's not saying that lechatchila you're allowed to. Lechatchila is the problem. That's why the Gemara is saying, what do you mean? It's Baal Tosif. So therefore we can't consider it valid until you cut it off, until you cut off the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like this time was saying. Yeah. Sometimes the Gemara uses this logic exactly the opposite. It says if it's considered that you're violating Baal Tosif, then obviously it has to be something. But if it's nothing, then it's not the mitzvah. So obviously it has to be. Here we're not doing that. Here we're saying exactly the opposite. We're saying it's Baal Tosif. How could you consider it anything? Right? You can pull this svara different ways.
Amen.
So this it talks about. You can use one svara to tell me that Yechayev, svara, one logical idea, to tell me that Yechayev, or to tell me that Yepater. The same logic. Same logic can be pulled both ways. Quote, at least I saw this by the Rebbe Marash. He quotes the Panim Yafas. Quotes that flaw. Talks about Hashem was going to destroy the world by the Mabel. It says, I'm going to destroy the world. You see, Yetzer Lev Adam Rak He just thinks about evil all day. Then after the flood, he says, I'm not going to destroy the world because the people, their natural inclination is to think bad all day. I'm not going to destroy the world. The same logic is one for Chiyuv, one for Tush. Anyway, now the Gemara says, Maskifla Rapapa. Rapapa says, Mimai de Gavrele Sufi Kamachaven. How do you know that the person that was adding the new tzitzis was trying to add Dilma Levatuli Kamachaven? Maybe he was just trying to nullify the first ones. And if that's the case, if there's no Baltaisif, because he really wasn't considering these to be a fifth corner, he was just considering them to be the original because he's going to take off the other ones. So that's the case, then taking off the old ones is not going to be an action. It's going to be Tasav Lemanasi. We were saying that it's not Tasav Lemanasi because when you take it off, you're actually doing a Tasa. Now we're saying that, in other words, usually Tasa means that you actually make and not the tzitzis. That would be the Tasa. Here we developed this thing that there's a possible to have a Tasa by doing a very considerable action of taking off the old tzitzis that takes away the Baal Taisef. That would be a real action. But over here, we're saying that there's no Baal Taisef. Maybe. Okay, so what's our answer? We don't have an answer. Amar Rav Zera. Amar Rav Masna, Amar Shmuel. Okay, so now it's the name of Shmuel. Rav Masna was a student of Shmuel, although there are cases where Rav Masna looks like a teacher of Shmuel.
Well, learn more from your student.
Apparently, there were like sukkim different times when Shmuel needed a pshat and a pasuk. I think Rav Masna was the one that would explain it. Anyway, Rav Zera says name Rav Masna name Shmuel Tchelas ein ba mishum kalayim va'afilu betzitzis petura. Okay, so the first part of the statement is easy. That tzitzis doesn't have the concept of kalayim, shatnez. Why? We said before that you have to put wool tchelas, even if it's even if the other strings or if the garment is linen. Then it says that there's no prohibition of kalayim, even if the talis is exempt. Even in a talis that's exempt. The Gemara asks, my talis p'tura. What do you mean a talis is exempt? Do you mean that it's not large enough? The talis is exempt because it's too small. And we're saying that if you add tchelis into it, if you add the kalayim into it, it's not going to be a prohibition. But Tanya, it's not true. Because talis shakatan miskasavei reisha berubei. A talis that's large enough that a child can cover his head and his body, and then v'hagadol yetziv derech harai. And even if it doesn't fit the adult, but if it's enough that the adult could wear it temporarily outside, he won't wear it to a wedding, but if he was running out to take out the garbage, he could still wear that or something. So it's b'shas adchak, it's fit to be worn. So that's already the size that chayav is betzitzis. Ein katan miskasavei reisha berubei. If it's smaller than a child covering the majority of his body, it's really a tiny little thing like a handkerchief or something, that size. So then, even if a gadol could use it in a temporary manner, but it's still pater. It's not large enough. The minnows were following what could cover the size of a katan. Then we say that the same thing applies to kalayim. Okay, now we said before that even in a talis petura, there's no kalayim. Now we quote a brisa that says the size of tzitzis, and we conclude that if it's too small, it's exempt from tzitzis, and so too with kalayim. We asked on this, what do you mean, and so too with kalayim, with shatnez? Do you mean lenisura the kalayim, which would mean that if it's too small, then there's no prohibition of kalayim? Let's say it's too small, to wear, then there's no problem of kalayim. It's too small for a child. There's no problem of kalayim. So if that's the case, Banan Tanan ain't a rai b'kalayim. But we have a Mishnah that says that the excuse, the excuse that it's just temporary, is not a real excuse by kalayim. So even if it would be too small, it would still be a problem, because we said something that's too small for a child, but an adult wears it arai, we said is exempt from tzitzis. But we learned that it's chayiv in kalayim. So what do you mean v'chein lein in kalayim? That the same law of tzitzis would apply to kalayim. It's not true. Kalayim applies and tzitzis doesn't apply. Right? So the Gemara answers. They explain that brisa. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. What does it mean v'chein lein in kalayim? V'chein lein sadim b'tzitzis. Same thing applies to a linen garment regarding tzitzis. That if it's very small, so it's going to have, not that it's exempt from kalayim, but it's going to have the prohibition of kalayim. So it's interesting. The chain is like sort of like in contrast. It's not comparable. But we said what's chayiv in tzitzis and what's pater from tzitzis. Now we're saying, but that doesn't matter regarding kalayim. The chain in kalayim, it's still going to have the prohibition. Elamai. So if that's the case, now we have to go back to what Shmuel said. Shmuel said that tzitzis has no problem of shatnez. Just also and also in a afila b'talis betura, even in a talis that's exempt. What did it mean a talis that's exempt? It meant a talis that's too small. Talis that's too small, we just said, has a problem of kalayim. So it doesn't fit what Shmuel says. That was our question. It was a question in a question. And now, based on the answer that we gave to the question, now we have a question on Shmuel, that Shmuel seemed to say that if it's even a talis that's too small is still going to be exempt from the prohibitions of shatnez. We're seeing that it's not true. Even when it's too small, then it's prohibited to have the shatnez in it. Right, exactly. So Elamai Ptura. Now we have to go back to. So what did Shmuel mean that says that there's no kalayim in a talis that's exempt? Yeah, there's no kalayim in a talis that's exempt. So the Gemara answers hitil lemutalis. We're talking about that the talis was exempt because you already had put into that talis tzitzis. And now you're adding on more. You're adding on another set. You say that there's no kalayim, there's no prohibition of kalayim. What did Reb Zera say before? Reb Zera said before, hitala matalis is kshera. Okay, that's the case. Hitala matalis is kshera. If you added tzitzis to talis that already had, the tzitzis are kosher. That was our whole problem. Why you say it's kosher, it should be tasal lemenas. But Reb Zera says that it's kosher. Now, if Reb Zera says that it's kosher, then that would fit very well with what we're saying over here. But the Gemara asks it as a question. But Reb Zera already told us. Reb Zera said that if you have a talis that already has tzitzis on and you add more tzitzis, it's kosher, right? So that would basically tell me also that there's no prohibition of kalayim if it's kosher. So why do I need Reb Zera to tell me that there's no prohibition of kalayim? He already told me it's kosher. There's no kalayim. The Gemara explains chad mechlal dechaver te'itmar. It wasn't said actually twice. We derived one from the other one. It said once. It says that that it's kosher, and then we understood from that there's no prohibition of kalayim. Taner Rabbanan. We have a new discussion here. Talis kfula hayavas b'tzitzis. You know the story with there was a rebbe that he was very into getting his the mitzvah of tzitzis. He wanted to get cloth from Eretz Yisrael, and one of the chassidim went to Eretz Yisrael, got wool, brought it back for the rebbe to make tzitzis. It was like input. So the way they make tzitzis is you fold it in half. And then when it's folded in half, you cut out like a semicircle. You open it up, you have a circle for the head. So they gave the honor of cutting the hole to one of the chassidim. So when he cut the hole out, he had cut it instead of having it folded in half. It was actually folded in quarters. So when he cut out the hole, he ended up making two holes in the two sides of the garment. There were two holes in it instead of one. So they were devastated. They went to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said that one hole is for my head. The other hole is to make sure I don't lose my head and get angry about this. Woo! Anyway, we're talking about a folded talus. So a folded talus is chayiv and tzitzis. Now, where do you put it? What does it mean chayiv and tzitzis? On the fold. Fold it over. You put tzitzis on the fold. Right? You put on one end. You put on the other end. Which corner of the other end? Two of the corners. Right? A garment that has more than four corners only gets four tzitzis. It doesn't get six tzitzis. It only gets four tzitzis. Right? Right? If you're wearing an octagon or whatever. Yeah, we're talking about when just a garment. A garment could make a garment however you want. So, but how many tzitzis would you put on a garment that has a lot of corners? You'd only put on four of them. The other ones you would leave empty. Here, so he's putting tzitzis on. He's chayiv and tzitzis puts on the corners. Reb Shimon fighter. Shimon says no, it's exempt because when you open it up, the tzitzis are going to be in the center, not on a corner. Shavin, but they both hold shimkafla v'tafra utfara shechayeves. That if you folded it and then you sewed it shut. Yeah, so it's just a double cloth, but it's really it's not opening up. So then it's chayev and tzitzis because it's not opening up. The Gemara says tafra pshita. If you sewed it, then of course it's going to be chayev. Look, sometimes you have lining in a garment. You have lining. You have to have tzitzis, right? Doesn't mean you have to put on the outer garment and on the lining you have to put on another one. No, it's all sewed together. We're talking about that it wasn't mamish sewed. We're talking about that they used very large stitches, which it's held together, but it's not really sewed together. It's not like a permanent stitch. It's like a large stitch. But okay. Rabba bar Huna ikloi lebei Rava bar Rav Nachman. Yeah, Rabba bar Huna. So, over here. When you tell me what you mean. Yeah, I forget where it says that. It's in Rashi and Chumash, and it's a Gemara. The Gemara is going to say. But the pasuk says, "Al arba kanfe," the four corners. I think it says. So not necessarily. It's just the Torah is beyond logic. Also logic, but it comes from a source that's beyond logic. So Rabbah ends up by Rabbah. It's a different Rabbah and it's a different Rabbah. But this in the story, Rabbah ends up in the house of Rabbah. Rabbah sees that Rabbah was wearing a talus that's folded. And he put the tzitzis on the top of the fold. If shita v'asachute v'kam lahadiresha, he opened it up, and it comes out that the tzitzis were coming out from the top, from the center of the talus instead of from the corner. Amralei. So he says to him, "Lav hainu kanaf the rice. That's not a corner that the Torah is talking about. It says to put it on the corner, right? It's coming out from the middle." Asa shadye. He takes it off. He throws it. Kasi glima achrita, and he puts on another garment. Amralei. So he says that's not enough. Misavas cheves gavru. You think only when you're wearing it? It's chayev. Cheves talasit. You can't have the garment hanging around your house. It's an obligation on the garment that the garment needs to have. If you own this garment, you have to put tzitzis on it. Yeah, every garment that you have has to have tzitzis. Zil ramilach, go put on the tzitzis on the garment that you just took off. Leima Messiah, let's bring a support that tzitzis is a chayvas beged, not a chayvas gavra. The difference between the gavra and chefza, yeah, it's like a lamdish thing.
Yeah, it's like a brisk idea, right?
Yeah, brisk. In certain yeshivas, the way they learn is let's say the laws of Shabbos. Yeah, is the prohibitions of Shabbos. Is it that I'm not allowed to do it, or is it that the item should not have that done to it? What is this? Is it me doing it, or is it the item should not have that done? Exactly. So is it, let's say carrying. Is it that when Shabbos comes in, this item needs to stay on this location, and I'm not allowed to move it to, or is it that the item is not allowed to be on another location because of Shabbos?
My yeshiva, the word "I" was a bad word.
Is it the guy then in the Gavra, then in the Hefza? They would they'd say like this. They wanted to say that depends. If it's a mitzvah that's time, that's associated with time, so then it can't be in the Hefza. It's only in the Gavra. It's because it's Shabbos, you're not allowed to move it. But the item itself it can't have any prohibition on the item because what happens tomorrow if there's a prohibition on it? Only that you, on this time, you're not allowed to do it. That's good. Let's say when it comes to treif, is it that you're not allowed to eat it or it's not allowed to be eaten? It's not like, what is it? Is it on the item or is it on you? Anyway, over here, the question is, you have tzitzis. Is it that you're not allowed to wear the tzitzis? This is more general. You're not allowed to wear a garment without tzitzis, or the garment needs to have tzitzis on it. What's the difference if you're not wearing it? Okay. Yeah. It means on the sides of the opening. Let's bring a support that the tzitzis is an obligation on the garment. It says Chasidim Rishayim Kimin Shargu Bashalish Matilim Batcheles. Chasidim Rishayim, once they would sew, once they would weave 3 finger breadths, they would already put on the tzitzis. Oh, why would they put it on? They weren't wearing it. They weren't even finished it. We said that it wasn't the first 3; it was the last 3, whatever. But they weren't even finished. It must be that once the chiyuv comes on the garment, you're already putting it on. We said that's not a proof. Shani chasidim, the machmer and avshaya, chasidim are different. Chasidim are strict. You can't bring a proof from chasidim that that's the halacha. Pligadim halacha, the very famous Gemara is right here. The Rabbi Bar Avuna that says that it's chayvus beged is arguing on the angel. You ready? You ready for the story? It says the malacha ashkechel Rav Katina the mekase sedina. So there's a malach that's walking around, and he meets up with Rav Katina, and Rav Katina is wearing a sudden, a linen garment, and we had a rule before that linen garment. Well, actually, we had a machlekes about this. Shmuel and not Shmuel, Shammai and Hillel. Whatever the case is, he held that it's exempt from tzitzis because it's linen. Amalei, the Malach says to Rav Katina, Katina. Maybe he means to call him by his name twice, Katina, or maybe he means like small Katina. Sedina bekaita v'sarbala b'sisva. It says in the summer you wear a linen garment, so you're exempt, and then in the winter when you put on like wool, so you put on a sarbala. Sarbala is like round. It's not right. It doesn't have corners. So tzitz shel tcheles matialei. Every time you're always going to be exempt from tzitzis. You'll never need to wear tzitzis. Yeah, you avoid it over here. You avoid it over there, and you won't wear tzitzis.
Nice angel.
Amalei. So if Katina says to the Malach and Shisua say, is that how it works in heaven? That if you don't do an extra mitzvah, you get punished? I'm not wearing 4 corners. Don't wear 4 corners. You're not chayiv in tzitzis. This is what everyone asks. All the people say, why do you have to wear tzitzis? There's somewhere 4 corners. You're not chayiv in tzitzis. This is Rav Katina. So the Gemara says, Amar Lei, the Malach answers, actually, there's mandik ritcha on Shinan. Yeah, actually. In heaven, there's moments when there's like a bad mood in heaven. There's like a time of anger. So then they look around and they see this guy didn't, he avoided the mitzvah, and they punish for that too. In other words, you're supposed to bring the obligation onto yourself to be able to do the mitzvah, right? Not just to always find an excuse to exempt yourself. So, okay, now the Gemara is saying, if you say that's an obligation on the person, so then you could say maybe that the person, there would be a leniency and a stringency that comes out from it if it's obligation on the person. On the one hand, the leniency is that until you wear it, you don't have to put it on. On the other hand, if it's an obligation on the person, then the person should actually be doing something to get the tzitzis. However, if you say chayvas talasu, but if it's just a chayva on the talis, what does it have to do with him? Do with the talis? He didn't have the talis, he didn't put it on. If it's an obligation on him, so then maybe he should try to make himself obligated to put it on because it's part of his obligation. But if it's an obligation just on the talis, so why would there be any punishment? Talis is pater, and he has nothing to do with that. Gemara says, "Elamai chayvas gavro." What do you want to say? It's chayvas gavra? Even if you say it's an obligation on him, the obligation is only on him. If he has a talis, that's chayiv. How should he be chayiv if the talis itself is exempt? That Ella hachi kamar, rather, what the malach was telling him is tatzdike lemiftar nafshach mitzitzis. Are you looking for tatzdike, for tactics, to exempt yourself from tzitzis, right? That wasn't acceptable.
No loopholes.
Still be right would be.
But when they do this check in heaven, they have it all. They're not going to help them have it in the floor.
So the Gemara wasn't viewing it like that. That if it's a obligation on the garment, then his garment would have been at home. He would have had the tzitzis on the garment, and he wasn't wearing it. Maybe that is what it means.
Nice angel, it really looks out. There's one. I had an angel. He must be a nice guy.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. The way this is how the Shita Mekabetzis learns it. Why is he? If it's a chayvas beged, if it's an obligation on the garment, then maybe he has a garment at home. And why is the malach getting angry at him? He has a garment at home. It's tzitzis. Yeah, that's very good. That's how the Shita Mekabetzis is learning this. Right. Now, tefillin, no one says that it's good enough to own it. Right? It doesn't say that. Tefillin is something that you have to put it on your arm. By the talis, it could be confusing that maybe it's an obligation to have on the garment. It says that it should be on your garment. This fringes. You put it on the garment.
Who was Rav?
I'm not sure.
But then, like, how do you see it, right? The whole point is to see it to remind you of the mitzvahs.
Oh, yeah. If it's in your drawer, every time you open your sock drawer, you see it. I had a guy, Balsheva in Bell Harbor. He said, I got film for the bar mitzvah, but I kept it in my sock drawer. And it wasn't until I met Rabbi Lipsker that I pulled it out. Okay. Amar Rav Tuvi Bar Kisna, Amar Shmuel. Bar Kisna says the name of Shmuel Keli, Kalei Kufsa, Chayevim B'tzitzis. Garments that are held in a chest, in a box, they're Chayev and Tzitzis. Yes, he holds that it's Chayvas Gavra. Moed Shmuel B'zakin She'asa L'chvaydai She'ptura. He made shrouds, an older person that made a garment for his honor, which means he made tachrichem, shrouds. Yeah? So that is exempt from tzitzis. My time, why is it exempt from tzitzis? It says asher techasaba, that you will cover. Amar Rachmana. Hi, lav l'ksuyavida. And this is not made to cover you. It's made to cover him after he passes, but not while he's alive. But he shaita vadar aminan lai. However, the Gemara concludes, it says that when he does pass away, they put tzitzis on it. Mishum loig l'rosh charav v'seyu. They don't want to bury him without tzitzis. That would be mocking the dead. That saying, "Oh, you're exempt from tzitzis. You don't need this." Very good. Does anyone know? Do we actually do this? Do we actually put tzitzis on it? Do we cut off the one corner? I think the Gemara Nida talks about taking off a corner of the tzitzis when they bury them. Find someone from the ask, someone that's in the Chevra Kadisha. Amar Rachva Amar Rav Yehuda. The Gemara Nida is talking about when they get up from the dead, if they're going to be chayiv in tzitzis, then what are they going to do for the first moment when they get up? Like if the tzitzis are possible.
Whoa.
That's the discussion over there.
Go to askbaclaria.com.
If the talus is torn, and it's torn outside the, we have a little box on the corners of our tzitzis, a little silk box. That's supposed to make clear that there's no tears in the garment, because a tear in that garment is possibly sewn up, and the tzitzis that are hanging out are the edges of the stitches that you'd use to sew. So we want to have one box that has no rips in it, so that we put on an extra piece to show that this is perfect without any. There's no problem with these tzitzis. It's the strings that are in it are not coming strings from the garment. So it says if a talus tears, it's outside the 3 fingers, that's the spot where you put the tzitzis yitbar. That's not a problem. You can sew it over there. So, however, taich shalish, but if it's within those 3 finger breadths from the edge of the garment, lo yitvar, don't sew it up, because we're concerned that maybe it's going to be a tasav lemanasi problem. The stitches that are there are going to end up be turning into tzitzis, and that's not why they were put there. It was also taught in the if it's torn. If the garment is torn outside the 3, you can sew it up. But Taich Shalish, in the middle of the 3, Rameir says, can't sew it? Chum say yes, you can. B'shavin, but Rameir would agree, Shalayavi, Afilo Ama Alama, Imakamacher Bat Chelas. I guess it means the Chacham will agree. Chacham will agree that you can't bring a garment from somewhere else that has in it already tzitzis, b'toilaba, and attach it to this garment. B'shavin, they'll also agree. Maybe tchelis makam acher v'toilaba. That you can bring tzitzis from other places, from somewhere else. You'd untie it, and you can put it on over here. That's not a problem. You can take it off one garment, put it on another garment. B'vad shaloi tehei mafsekas. As long as all the strings are whole, you can't make the string by tying knots in it. Shamet mina, we learned from this. Matir mi beged lebeged. We've learned from this that you're allowed to take strings off one tzitzis and put it on another garment. This was a discussion in Maseches Shabbos about lighting from one candle to another candle by the Chanukah. So it says over there, can you take tzitzis off one garment and put it on another garment? And so here we have a proof that you're allowed to. It says clearly. The Gemara says no. Dilma di bali. Maybe the reason why you're taking it off this one is not because the old one was good and you're just putting on a new one. Maybe the old garment wasn't fit to be worn anymore because it's getting worn out. So then when you take them off, then it's eligible. You put on a new one. Otherwise, there's a concern that maybe it's considered embarrassing the first mitzvah by removing the tzitzis off it. It's like stripping it of its mitzvah and putting it on a new one. That wasn't acceptable. However, if it wasn't able to be worn because of it was torn or being disintegrating, then you can put it on a new one. Let's leave it by Tanur Rabbanan.
Woo!
Yeah. Mem Aleph on the base. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.